The story of Naboth has in itself, in embryo, the story of us all. We seem to think that we own things and that our felicity, our joy, our well-being is in some way in direct proportion to what we can grasp. It's a vast illusion. A creature, by his very nature, has and ever has nothing, nothing, nothing. That is the nature of our creatureliness. We came from a dream in the Eternal Father's mind. In Job, naked I came from the earth, and naked I will return. And as Sheila would say, there are no pockets in a shroud. The notion then of joy can be analysed. What makes us joyful? As in reverse, what makes us sad? Now, if one looks around the globe, one will see more or less this pattern emerge. Massively, humankind is operating on the level of proportion to the material, therefore is condemned to unhappiness. Those, on the contrary, who, with divine grace, somehow realize the truth of their state, are free. And therefore the approach to the mystery of life is radically different. They receive. They receive without commanding. They receive with equality of humour, with indifference as to the form in which the will of God manifests itself. For all that is important to them is that, the divine will. Now, there can be, even in the spiritual life, an illness of owning the spiritual. We will only be happy if the will of God manifests itself in this way. A concrete example. We are in prayer, happy to be there before the tabernacle. And then somebody comes to look for us. What is our reaction? It could be one of spiritual unhappiness. I am losing my rights over God and my consolation. Well, we haven't understood perhaps the first thing. Because if we are genuinely in prayer, we are in a creature's mode of prayer, of adoration and complete submission and handing over. Therefore, what do? We say yes to the minimal suggestion of the will of the one that we're adoring, which in that form comes in the form of the demand to meet him in that form which we hadn't programmed. But there's no diminution of joy. Now, do you see that over the length of a life, that trick is massively important. Otherwise, we're going to go up and down, up and down. Whereas if we are in supernatural vision of the will of God, concretely manifested in the here and now, by the doorbell ringing, then, yes, Lord, immediately I only want it because you are there in that form and saying to me, leave me for me. And that's where you'll find me at that point. Now, for that to happen, we need also a certain clarity and freedom within. I'd like to look at a few things which take it away, because we are sick, we are ill, we are contaminated. Now, this is the main, or no longer, but it was the main exorcist of Rome for a long time, Rome Diocese, Gabriel Amart, still alive. This, he's dead now, but not long dead, was the main exorcist in the southern part of Italy where he was operating, well known down there, and also a very charismatic. Both holy men, and they know from handling in hand-to-hand combat over years and years the forces of darkness, what being ill in the spirit means, and what are some of the things that immediately cause illness, concrete things from which we are not excluded. Now, there are certain things which are bound to lead to a weakening of grace in the soul. Let's be concrete. If one comes out of mode of prayer of adoration or Holy Communion, having extended one's tongue to receive the Lord of Hosts, and then, without realizing what's happening, withdraws the rights that one has given to God over one specific part of the body, the tongue, then we are immediately taking back that adoration. It is completely incomprehensible that love can extend itself in mode of genuine contemplation if we engage the muscles of the tongue to say anything which we know to be offensive to the Divine Majesty, which is presumed to lay itself upon that tongue a few minutes earlier. When, years ago, I was in formation not far from here in Kilmer Cross, I was in Cavan Town one day, and Father Gerard commented, as we saw the Protestant school in the area, Anglican presumably, on that playground they say you'll not hear a single swear word. And I thought to myself, that's an interesting reflection, and I wondered why. We're going back a few years now. But also something that I was aware of, coming from Wales, that in school, which was very much in the Welsh-speaking culture in which I was brought up, to be a Christian and to engage the mouth for any word which was offensive was a grave, grave sin. Very grave indeed. It's so far that if one did, one was classed as if it were officially a sinner, as a child. It was just not done. That was the intensity of the formation that we had in school and Sunday school and chapel and at home. And it was the norm. And then, when I discovered that not all Christians had that same mentality, I was very surprised. And it occurred to me, even as a child, how can one ever say a bad word or bring God into it and be a Christian? It just don't make sense. Because we knew that it was actually in the Ten Commandments that one would not use God in anything that was outside the sacred. Because if it's in Scripture, it was important to us. And therefore, when learning these commandments, we were given also its meaning. And a sin is a sin. Either it is or it isn't. And therefore, to see down the line people from other forms of Christianity who were quite happy to use bad words or to use the name of God or anything to do with Him, was something which caused perplexity. And of course, it was also something that Protestants used as a lever to show that Catholics were lacking in something. Now, it was difficult to answer that one to them. Why should they have higher standards on that point? It just does not make sense. So it's something that I bring back to you, my friends. We need always be very careful how we engage the tongue. Either it's morally correct or it isn't. You have to be coherent. But there are things now in society as it's gone in which each time that we engage other faculties we may be sinning, and more than we think. As one ambles around nowadays, in cities especially, it is not indifferent where one commands one's eyeball muscles to steer, rest and land. To look at a tree is one thing. To look at impure publicity is another. It's the same movement with the muscles of the eye, but there's a moral difference in the act. Now, also, any human being wearing any form of immodest dress, again, there's a choice or not, and an instinct to be cultivated. The summer months in particular, the instinct of where one lets the eyes rest. A stage further. Since I was a child, a new norm has entered into what is acceptable and not. We didn't have television when I was a young child. Eventually it came in, but it was always okay for children because we only saw certain programs at certain times. Now, as the years are going on, I haven't got television, but I do know from other people, each time the barriers are coming lower and lower and lower. Now, in recent times, and it's fairly recent compared with human history, most civilized countries and therefore people are also involved with the cybersphere. And this, as television, is preponderantly inclined to be contaminated. In itself, any scientific knowledge and instrument is good. It's a harnessing of energy and human genius. But as that can lead to the fabrication of the atom bomb and misuse of it, so too it can lead to the manifestation of Satan in all that is hostile to God. And therefore we have truly what the Apocalypse speaks of as the image of the beast enthroned, not only in the living room, but even in the privacy of our bedroom. Screens can be doors to and from hell, because they contain the most foul things imaginable. And if we do not react, and if we willingly again exercise the will to engage the muscles, in this case of the hand, to press certain keys, and remain therein, even though it's exactly the same movement of the muscles as to look into the Bible on a screen, the moral act is quite different, and we are consenting to letting Satan thrown on the screen, and therefore in our mind, because once it's in, and once it's in, it's implanted in the memory bed, and will not go away as long as we are on earth. We carry our memory and the images they contain. Therefore, these are portholes. Now, people, even respectable people, are getting into, first of all, the occasional consent, then into no longer reacting bit by bit and thinking they can get away with spending long times. Now, they don't realize that there's actually a hidden agenda. The most visited sites on the cybersphere, we know this statistically, are those that are in some way hard porno, which says a lot about our civilized world. But they're everywhere and coming up in the margins. So be careful and say a prayer to the Holy Spirit every time you go into internet, because internet is no longer home. It's a whole world in which the whole world is present, with the worst and the best. Take you to another sphere. What is happening when we choose, either aware or unaware, voluntarily or just passively, to give over to one of these instruments what is God's, given to us on loan? Time. It's not indifferent where this evening will go. Right now, we are doing the best we can with this evening. We're handing it over back to the Creator and wanting a word. It's quite different when we willingly abdicate and passively let it happen. 1 hour becomes 2, 2 becomes 3. You may still be at a screen at midnight and beyond. What's happened then? Where is the prayer in the morning? And these moments are the key to the interior life. Remember, a secret I'm giving you. The secret of the interior life hangs on the end of the finger of the alarm. That will to give each morning that virgin time before other things happen to the Maker, that he may reign over the day, changes all. And old Nick knows it full well. It's the disaster of religious houses, the disaster of monks, nuns and priests. That virgin encounter, the prolonged moment before anything else happened, which made all the difference for 2,000 years, bit by bit, is ceding the place to the late evenings, often of poor quality. I remember growing up as a young Catholic, as I converted even in school days, the parish was run by monks. There were 6 or 7 Benedictines there running our parish, and whatever time you got there, they were already there in prayer, behind their hoods. And that was a lesson to anyone. God was reigning in that parish. It was handed over to God before any ministry was done. In your case, don't say it can't be done. Think, can it or can it not? It's not that difficult to make sure that it goes to bed in such a way that a good, long, empty time exists at dawn or before dawn, before rushing and running into the day. Because that's what life will be, rushing and running to the end of the day, rushing and running to the end of our time, falling into the grave out of breath, because we never had quality moments and was always chasing.